In this video, you're going to learn how to assign multiple audio outputs in Ableton Live when you're using an audio interface. This video is brought to you by Worship Leader School, where you're going to find a complete step-by-step online course for how to lead worship with Ableton Live. Click the link in the description to learn more. And now let's dive into this lead worship with Ableton quick tip. So here we have a complete Ableton Live set list, and usually when I go to start assigning my external audio outputs, it's after I've built my complete set, and this is just one of the final steps in my whole preparation process. Plugged into this laptop, I have the Scarlett 18i20. It's plugged into my laptop via USB, and this Scarlett 18i20 has up to 10 line outputs. I believe you can actually have 20 outputs. I haven't really looked into how exactly that process works, but just on the back of this interface, you'll have 10 quarter-inch line outputs, which would make it really easy for us at our church to basically patch those outputs into our digital snake on stage. So here's where you need to go to start adjusting these audio output settings. Go to Live, go to Preferences, and then make sure you're in the audio tab right here, and then under audio input and audio output devices, this is where we're going to adjust some settings. So under audio input device, most of the time when you're just running tracks, you can just leave this at no device because you're probably not putting much audio or any audio into Ableton Live. It's really the output device settings we want to change. By default, it's going to have the built-in output, which is usually your headphone output or your speakers on your laptop. And you have two outputs. You have one which is going to be the left side, and then output 2 is going to be the right side. Underneath your output device list here, you're going to see other devices that you have plugged in. I actually have two interfaces right now, one to record the microphone I'm using right now, and then we have the Scarlett 18i20 USB device that shows up right here. Sometimes these devices have names that don't necessarily match up with the model of the device, so just try it out. You'll see like this one has 18 ins and 20 outs, so this is definitely the Scarlett, and it obviously says Scarlett right there. So I'm going to have that selected, and then I'm going to go to output configuration right here. And I actually already went through and did some output configuration. I'm going to delete all this real quick though for you so you can understand what I did here. So now I have all this output configuration cleared and deleted. I'm going to show you how I would go setting this up for worship. You're going to see we have the option between mono outputs or stereo outputs. Mono outputs are great for instruments that really just don't need that stereo spread or separation within your main mix. So like a click track doesn't really need to be stereo. Guide cues don't really need to be stereo. Even bass guitar and pads, I keep those in mono because I don't think they need to be in stereo. But things that do need to be stereo, I would recommend running in stereo if you have the available outputs, are things like all of your electric guitar backing tracks or keys backing tracks. You'll notice actually when you look at the different backing track stems that many of them were actually created in stereo. So if I look at one of these stems here, you'll see there's two lines of audio going on in here. That means that it's a stereo track. So you want to be able to hear that separation from the left and the right in your main mix. So we're back at our output configuration. Here's how we are going to set it up. I'm going to go ahead and just enable these top two buttons here for stereo outputs 1 and 2. And under mono outputs, I'm going to label this click, and then I'll label the second one guide. So this means mono output 1 is click and 2 is going to be guide. And then for 3 and 4, this is where I want to group most of my backing tracks. The ones that I want to be in stereo, like my electric guitars, keys, and other tracks that are just really intended and they're going to sound better and much clearer in stereo. So for 3 and 4, I'm going to select that as stereo output, and I'm going to call this just tracks. And then I'm going to go to 5 and 6 right here, and these are going to be two mono outputs. I'm going to put my bass tracks in number 5, and then I'm going to put my pads in number 6. So as I currently have it set up, I'm using 6 outputs from this audio interface. Of course, I have many more that I could use, but sometimes you're limited by how many you can actually fit into the mixing console that you're using in worship. And I don't want to make things super complicated. I find that, separating out the click and guide, and honestly, sometimes I actually put the click and guide just on the same output anyway, but I find that separating out, these stereo tracks from your bass tracks and pads just gives your front of house sound engineer a lot more flexibility. I especially love separating the bass tracks from the rest of the backing tracks so they can have more control just over the frequency spectrum and how they're mixing the sound. So once you have all those outputs assigned the way you would like them, just press OK and then exit out of here. And now we can go to the individual audio tracks and start assigning the external outputs they need to be routed to. Already, this session had it so my click and guide were actually on track 1, but I'll go ahead and change my guide track to external output 2. I also like to put our original MP3 files into my set so you can hear what the song sounds like. So I'll just keep that on click for now. Usually this actually just remains off when we're playing music. So this is a great way for just the band to hear the original recording and not everybody else who is listening to the front of house mix. So next, to make sure the majority of my tracks are going to that stereo output that I have configured, I'm going to go to session view here, and then I'm going to go down to the master output, and I'm going to assign my master output to 3 and 4. That's our stereo tracks output. So that means most of all these tracks that are assigned to the master output here are just going to go to that 3 and 4 stereo outputs that we've just set up. But next we need to assign our bass and our pads output. So let's go to our bass channels first. I expanded out all these tracks so I can go ahead and select them, and I'll command click on all these tracks here. Keep scrolling down. Let's see what these tracks are actually labeled. Select that one. So I have almost all my bass tracks selected. I got to go ahead and go to the external out section of the track, and then I'm going to select bass track. So that changed it for all the bass tracks that I had selected. And I also like to, select the external outputs for like synth bass tracks too. Just anything that's going to be super bassy, I want to make sure is going to be in that bass external output. And for this last song, since we actually have to group the tracks for some automation purposes, I have to select the bass track separately here. So all my bass tracks are assigned, and then I'm going to go to my pad track here. I'm going to go to external output, and I'll hit pads. And I'll just press Command Save to save all those output changes. But now we're good to go. So you actually won't hear, we can't hear any audio right now from the session through my computer speakers because all of it's being assigned to the different outputs right here. So you can see the audio being sent to the bass tracks and then the pads track here when we have some pads playing during this kind of looping section right here. And then we have the click and guide going where they need to go. So that's how you set up audio outputs in Ableton Live, and this works with any audio interface that is compatible with Ableton, including interfaces by Focusrite or Behringer or even TrackRig by Loop Community. I want to encourage you to check out Worship Leader School. In there I have my complete Ableton Live online course. It's going to walk you through the whole process, step by step, click by click, how to master Ableton Live for your worship ministry and save a ton of time in your week-to-week prep. If you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends in ministry. Don't forget to subscribe to the Churchfront channel so you can receive all of our latest content to help you grow yourself and grow your church.